This is The Honest Hour. I'm your host, Nelisiwe Shamang. Welcome and thanks for joining me on this journey to having honest conversations. Hi guys, I'm Nelisiwe Shamang. Welcome to The Honest Hour. Today my guest is a good friend of mine, a very, very good friend of mine, an advocate for marriage and relationships and family and just building and growth. Today's episode is going to be focused on family, marriage, and I couldn't have thought of a better guest than Matshepo Seletswane.
Thank you, friend. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
So, I invited you today because I feel like you're someone who is so focused on building people, whether it's in the individual capacity, relationships, marriage, faith. And I think there's so much negativity around marriage in our generation. There's just a lot of, and understandably, people are genuinely going through a lot and they're sharing their experiences. And a lot of the times, those experiences are negative, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to speak to you because I've seen how you're just always there for people. You're always encouraging them. You are the person who you would never recommend breaking up. You would never recommend divorce. No, honestly, you're someone who says, Nelly, look at your flaws. Tabo, you are also a problem. You always make people introspect and sort of look at your contribution in the situation that you're in, whether you're dating, whether it's career, but I know you're very focused on, you're a big believer in marriage and the godliness of marriage and how much of a blessing it is. And another thing is you just made 10 years, 10 years of a happy, healthy marriage to a very, very lovely guy.
Thank you.
And I think you can just speak to the ups and the downs because it's like life. It's going to have its ups, but it's also going to have its downs.
Definitely.
But I think there's so much of a focus on the downs, and it's like there are happily married people out there, and I think I want to speak to people like yourself and where that thing and that love for marriage and that love for family comes from. But before we get into that, just tell us about who you are, where you're from, your upbringing, and what influenced your values.
I grew up in Soweto in Meadowlands. Then my parents, they moved to Kagiso. They had bought a house for themselves because in Meadowlands, it was like a whole generation of family living there together with my and my great-grandmother, actually, and my cousins and everything. It wasn't a perfect upbringing, but the main thing that was a concern of our family, our values were based on godliness, on biblical values. We were Christians and we still are Christians. So I think my zeal for relationships, for marriage, is that I believe that broken things can be fixed rather than taking them and throwing them away, And I think because I know that me, Matshepo, I have my flaws and I've seen grace given to me. I've seen me being treated with grace, and you learn in your suffering. I think I had to learn so much about marriage through my dark season in our marriage. And God was pointing me to my flaws, not my husband, but me. So that's how I learned, because God revealed certain things about me and about marriage itself that I didn't really know about, and things that I didn't really know about myself, because too often we assume that I'm the catch. Yes, I've got values and so forth, until God really lets you look yourself into the mirror and see yourself.
And nothing is a mirror to yourself quite like a relationship or a marriage. Like, it will show you exactly who you are.
Definitely.
You're not who you think.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm this sweet person. I'm unproblematic. You are problematic.
Marriage is going to expose you.
Yeah.
Marriage is going to expose you to yourself, and it's going to expose you to your spouse. We see Uneli, she's all put together and everything. Now your spouse is going to know, actually, does Nelly brush her teeth when she wakes up? Does Nelly actually take a shower?
Clean?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Does she really take good care of her emotional well-being and her spiritual well-being and so forth. Nothing exposes you like marriage. It's like looking into the mirror and you see yourself. You see things that you normally have patience for, you have an understanding for. Get married. Get married, then you see a different part of yourself.
So your parents were married, no?
Yes, my mom and dad were married before my dad passed. I think 36, 38 years of marriage, because they started dating as kids, actually, in primary school. I don't know how that works.
Sure.
I don't think it's going to work for me. Like in primary school, my mom got pregnant in high school. So I had to stay with my gran, and she had to go back to school to finish her high school, and my dad also and stuff. And they got married. And they actually
stayed
raised all three of
married.
us. Yes, all three of us.
And did that also inspire your desire to always have your own family?
Growing up, my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, she wasn't married, but she was a huge advocate of marriage. But she wasn't married personally, but she always taught me the benefits of marriage, and she always point me to the direction of being married and having a family of my own. And I think I'll look at my mom. My mom, she's a very reserved, down-to-earth person. You know, she's those type of people who have strength in
Inner strength,
exactly,
quiet strength.
in her quietness and everything. And I'll see my mom giving grace to my dad. You know, I'll see my mom giving grace to my dad time and time again. But then again, I would see my father loving my mom. Loving my mom like a queen. Because one thing about my dad, he was big on loving even me. To a point that you could be cocky. My dad will sing you praises as his child. He used to do it with me. He will affirm you. He will tell you how great you are. Even you know, you know, so I could see all those roles, but their marriage was not perfect. I mean, I'm the firstborn, so I knew their marriage was not perfect, but I could see how they could work together and make it work.
And I think that's part of the problem that a lot of us sort of internalize, that we have this idea that it has to be perfect, and it's like, it's not perfect. Just because you don't see people's problems, and rightfully so, you shouldn't see people's problems, because it's a private, you know, it's such a precious thing that you have to
Yes.
really protect.
It's very sacred.
Yes, it's very sacred. You can't just be going around telling everybody your issues, and then
Yes.
you're surprised when, you know, things don't work out, because you're allowing all this energy and people's
Exactly.
opinions to come into your...
By all means, we ought to protect our marriage.
Yes.
I think we are a generation that romanticize everything. Oh my
Gakhulu.
goodness.
And we don't it must be easy if it's
no,
hard.
No, it must be easy. What are you
Why is
talking
it hard?
about? Yeah, you know, everything must be easy. It must be a walk in the park.
Must be romantic all the time.
All the time. I think even when we think marriage, we're thinking the wedding dress, the venue, the guest, the food, the hairdo that I'm going to have. We don't really think marriage. We're actually thinking the wedding. We are so fearful of difficult things that we forget that actually we are created for difficult things. There is no perfect thing on this earth. I mean, this world has fallen because of sin. So perfection, so it's you know what I mean? So we have romanticized everything, that if it's hard, I'm out. I'm out. And we are a generation that is self-serving. Self-idolizing. Even the thought of just being a servant or serving another, it's absurd. And marriage is servanthood. Marriage is about serving each other.
Yeah, like submission is a dirty word in this generation. It's such a dirty word.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we don't have tolerance. We want things to cook in a micro oven, like 2 minutes and it's done. And we enter marriage with the same perception that, you know what, kuzobalula, we're going to have fun, we're going to have sex every night, every day, every morning. When it's not happening, something is wrong with my marriage, something is wrong with my husband. We have romanticized everything. We don't even know actually what marriage is. I think we need to start there at the base. What is marriage? Then we can understand what are we exactly entering into, because we've got this perception in our heads, which is not even umshado. which is
TV.
yeah, TV. I mean, Hollywood. This is how a marriage ought to be. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to tolerate your spouse. You don't have to give grace. Things have to be smooth. You have to love with conditions. You know, what is marriage? I mean, marriage is God defined. Marriage was established by God. Firstly, marriage is a covenant. It's not even a contract. But yes, ngabantu be contract na. You do me, I'm out. You do me, I'm canceling. Marriage is a covenant. What is a covenant? A covenant is an agreement with God and his people. In this institution, is the husband and the wife. A covenant is an agreement, is a promise of God with his people. But you see, in every covenant, there's a way of conduct for these parties now to carry themselves. There's a way of doing things. There's an order of things. There's an order of things, which is God's ways of doing things. Tina, we enter marriage. We don't even know what marriage is. And we don't even know God's order of things in marriage. We have our own ideas. Perhaps we've seen it from our parents. Perhaps it was even a toxic marriage. And we bring them forth into our marriage. We say, oh, okay, it's going to be like this. We don't even know the structure. One thing about God, God is very organized. God is not all over the place. God is very organized. He's not all over the place. So in this institution, he has a structure of how things ought to flow, how things ought to work. You know, hence God, when he was creating everything, he called everything good. Everything that he created good. But the moment God looked at Adam, he said it was not good for a man to be alone. That was the only time God said it was not good. So this notion, Yoguti, I mean, I can do without a woman. I mean, I can do without a man. It's even ungodly because God saw fit that a man needed a woman and a woman needed a man, because Eve does not know a life without Adam. Adam lived in the Garden of Eden without Eve. But when the moment you were created, you were brought forth to your Adam. That's all you know, your man. That's all you know. So now I think we have perverted what marriage is, what it stands for, and we want to do our own kind of marriage. Then we are shocked when things are not working out. The principle of a covenant, if you don't do things the way they ought to be done, you forfeit the blessing of God, you forfeit the covering, which is the protection, which is the grace of God flowing into this marriage. And I think we can say, my friend, today's Yazenza Ilanje. We don't even know the different roles in marriage.
So can you break a covenant? A covenant can be broken, right? People break the covenant.
According to God,
Or is that incorrect?
According to God, a covenant was not meant to be broken.
Okay.
Because a covenant had to be sealed by blood. For example, in this new covenant, in Christ had to die at the cross for us to create that covenant, which is what was by the shedding of blood. In marriage, how do we seal our covenant? When a man and a woman, they come together and they become intimate. When their hymen is broken, that's the shedding of blood. But we have done things according to what we want, according to what we prefer. Then when we get stuck, we are shocked. But if you buy a car, Nelly, for example, you buy a car from BMW, for you to operate in that car efficiently, for that car to serve you better and efficiently, you need to go to BMW for them to tell you about this car, how it works.
Maintain.
Right, and everything. But with marriage, we go to church to get married. We go to the court to divorce. When we get stuck in our marriage, we don't go back to God for him to help us. Ngale institution yakhe ayiqalile, because he knows it's better than any man. I mean, we do so many things, right, here in the world, but when it comes to something so personal, something so sacred, we just do the opposite.
I think there's influences there. I think, okay, there's a couple of things. I think sometimes one person wants to go to God, the other person is uyalena, they influenced by friends, by sometimes family, sometimes social media, this era of you can just swipe, you're not doing this, I'll find someone who will.
Options. You have options.
Options, yes, it's that thing of options. So I think part of the challenge is sometimes there's one person who wants to make it work more than the other,
Yeah.
and then the other person foolishly thinks there's options, or
Yes.
foolishly, sometimes, people end things and they shouldn't have ended.
Yes,
They were very
yes.
much repairable.
Exactly.
They were fixable. It's just that there's one part, okay, there's both people can cause issues in the relationship, but there's always, a lot of the times, a party who's causing a lot more damage than the other person. And sometimes, lo muntu loyo akafuna ukutshelwa.
Yeah.
And then that becomes a problem. How are you fixing with someone who abafuna ukutshelwa? Like, you can't be, akunamfazi ozohlala nawe, you are making babies in and out, and as committed as you are to your marriage, it starts becoming a risk to you personally. Uthi,
Yeah.
Phela, this is not, even God can.
Your safety, and
Safety,
everything,
mental
yeah.
health, for your children as well. What kind of, you're teaching your sons, your daughters that this is, so sometimes I think yes, you say the covenant doesn't break, but there is a break that happens with
Yes,
people where,
definitely, yeah.
I don't know whether people shouldn't have, abanye abantu, they got married for the wrong reasons, or they come across challenges within the relationship, and instead of fixing it within the relationship,
Yeah.
they turn to
Yeah.
external things, whatever, alcohol, friends, cheating, they sort of end up damaging their own. So I mean, I completely agree with you, but I do think there are people who bayazenzela, and you can't fix nomuntu who ongatshelwa. That's a danger for me. Like,
I think the danger is to start. We need to acknowledge and be okay that marriage is difficult. Let's start there. Marriage is not a walk in a park. Because I think what happens here, people enter into marriage, then they are shocked. No, let's be honest. I was shocked. You enter into marriage and you are shocked. And you're thinking, there is just no way. And your partner doesn't have to cheat on you. Your partner
yeah, that's true. It's
doesn't
not
have to
always
abuse
toxic.
you.
Yes, it's
your
not
partner
always
doesn't have
toxic.
to be screaming and
Yes,
shouting or
yes.
cursing. No.
It's difficult still.
One thing we don't talk more about is how hard marriage is.
And why is that?
Like, we're selling people a lie because we're telling people that, your marriage can work without you putting any effort. Your marriage can work with you living however you want to live.
He'll love you just the way you are.
And everything. Marriage is hard work. Because remember now, you and your spouse, you didn't even grow up in the same household. You didn't see the same things you saw. You don't know the wounds in his soul that he comes with into marriage. But the moment you come into marriage, God is going to... because marriage forces us to face ourselves like nothing else in this world. And sometimes God is waiting on you to enter into marriage to deal with those ones because you've been dodging God. You've been cool and hot and happening. But now, because in marriage it's not just uneli, you can't just bang the door and walk away. You need to deal. Then that's when God is going to revisit the wounds you've been running around with. Marriage is very hard. Let's tell young girls marriage is hard. Let's tell young men marriage is hard. Let's not lie and make marriage is that huge gown. No, that is the wedding. That is the celebration. Marriage is hard because marriage requires you to put your life down and come into union with this person and become one, and to learn to walk together side by side in unity. Can you imagine trying to walk with someone, you going to the right and your spouse is going to the left together? You can't walk together. But God requires us to walk in unity together. It's like we're joined into the hip. It requires humility. We don't have humility. We don't have humility because touch is a move. You do me once, I'm going to show you who I am. Mina futhi ngimuhle, I can do better. We enter marriage with those.
And society doesn't help. You know.
No, they tell you. They tell you,
right,
futhi ufundile wena. I think we don't take serious this promise that we have made with our spouses and with God because we think we can just, and I'm not downplaying the pains people come across in marriage. Marriage is the highest and the most intimate relationship here on earth. So obviously it's going to bring you the most intense pain. the things people undergo in marriage, it's painful. It's painful. It should have been like that. But most of us, if we are honest, we enter marriage singazi kahle kahle what is required of us, what is expected of us. We just think ukuthi hayi ngizoyishaya, ngiyamthanda. We are relying on our feelings. Marriage is not about feelings. Feelings, they fluctuate. Feelings. I mean, manje, I'm super because I'm sitting with my friend Uneli. I go out, I meet this person, then I'm feeling a certain way. Marriage is not about feelings. That's another thing. So we are so depending on our feelings. How does he make me feel? How does she make me feel? It's not about love. True love, it's sacrifice. How many of us are we willing to sacrifice?
And sometimes it feels unfair.
Definitely.
It's not always gonna be fair.
It feels unfair, and you rebel as a child, and God looks at you, and that's the thing about marriage. It will push you to grow up. It will push you to grow up.
Compromise, sacrifice, put yourself aside to give
For another person. Putting another person first.
Yeah.
Serving that person, whether your expectations are met or not. Continuing serving. Because you know what you're doing there? You are filling this cup. It takes forever to be filled. But the moment it's filled up to the brim, it overflows. And the seed that you've been planting as you are filling that cup, it's going to grow into a tree. And it's going to give you fruits. But now, fruits.
You know, I think another thing is people, like, for example, you've been married for 10 years. People see the 10 years, you know, and they like, they don't realize what it took to get to that 10 years.
Yeah.
They see that and they want that, but they don't realize that behind that 10 years is a lot of work, forgiveness, reconciling, working things out, sacrificing, putting yourself, taking the back seat on some things, giving 90% when your partner can only give 10, because it's not this 50-50 lie that we think, you know, equality, that just doesn't work. So I think that's another thing where you admire, you know, Connie Ferguson and her husband, and you just see this beautiful union that they are now. But you don't know the sacrifice. You don't know the sacrifice that they had to put in.
Yes.
And I don't know why we don't realize that. Obviously, they had to get to that. I mean, when you see someone who's a doctor, they were not a doctor overnight.
Exactly.
They went to school. There were sleepless nights. They turned down invitations for parties, for, you know, all kinds of things. They sacrificed money. But for some reason, when we see something that is beautiful, we want it like that.
Yeah.
Not realizing that behind that beauty, hey, there's some ugliness that has to be dealt with. Like, and it's not always toxic, like you say. It's not always this dramatic cheating, domestic violence. No, we're not encouraging that.
No,
but
we're not.
There is a lot of, you're gonna see the worst in someone.
Definitely.
And you're gonna have to learn to love them.
And you're gonna see the worst in you.
Yeah.
I think too often we are always pointing to the other person, my spouse. Like, how many people will just sit and say, "Yes, mina ngangibheda emshadweni, ngangibheda emshadweni."
Ngisabheda.
You know, ngisabheda, and I've seen how my spouse has loved me and given me grace while God is working in me. It's always the other person. It's always the other person. I think we're a generation that we just want all the fluff. All the fluff, all
flowers,
the beauty, all the
girlfriend allowance,
all the fluff,
all the things.
but never the effort, never the work. We don't want suffering. Suffering is not nice. I don't like suffering as well. But we grow mostly in suffering than in our comfort zones. We grow mostly in suffering than in our comfort zones. So that's the thing. And I think another challenge is that here you are now, you're a couple, you gotten married and everything, and you're in your home, but you don't even know your roles. Yeah, Nzanje.
And when they tell you your role, you take offense.
We take offense. And to be honest, we ladies mostly, we take offense. We take so much offense because we think somehow the structure that God created in marriage was ought to oppress a woman. You know, and society tells us that, really. Gucci, no, they're oppressing you and everything. Because God did say a man is the head, a man is the leader, and a woman ought to respect her husband in reverence and ought to submit to her husband. Hayi yabona leyo nje submitting kungamane kuxatshwane nabomama ngiyakutshela because it's such an offensive word which submit. Why should I submit? But the thing is, we do not understand that God did say he is the head. Christ is the head of the man. Man has to submit to God. You're not the only one submitting to your spouse. The head of your home, the leader of your home, your spouse ought to submit to God himself. And truly there are men who use submission to oppress their wives.
They are.
To think
In abusive ways.
To think submit now means to abuse your wife. But what submitting means, it's a posture of your heart. Your posture of your heart. Because God looks at the heart. Is the posture of your heart willingness. Your willingness to be led by this person.
But submission is inspired. There are men who don't inspire submission. We are ngofoekseni, you're drunk, you leave home on a Friday after work, you don't come. What is that?
Okay, so
what is that? How do you submit to someone who is not behaving like a head of a home?
So you say
submission is inspired.
Submission can be inspired.
It's like respect. Respect is earned. You can't just say, "Ngiyindoda, I'm the man of the house." Nhloniphe. You will naturally, the way we respected our fathers, because they had that istunzi, they had that respect. He wasn't walking around saying, "Yimi baba le khaya, respect me, respect me." He just had that presence that. And his actions also showed that
they follow.
He's the man of the house. He takes care of us. He's home at a certain time. He doesn't abuse my mother. So for me, that also inspires a sense of
definitely. You know, submission. Like you can inspire someone to respect you. Yes. You can inspire someone to submit to you. You can inspire someone to love you. You can inspire someone to take good care of you. But before we even get to that, let's park that. We'll come to that. Let's park that. First and foremost, it was a command. God was not suggesting you submit to your husband because it's easy to submit. That's the thing about us. We can't even differentiate between a command and a suggestion. God was not suggesting like, "Hi Nelly, monga corner." That's no. God was not suggesting. God was commanding that you submit. Not because your husband is easy to submit to your husband, not because your husband is highly educated, not because your husband is a good leader, not because your husband has money, not because your husband has a high position at work, not because your husband earns more than you. God said submit because he's your husband. And God did say to a man, he must love you like Christ loved the church. Now, how did Christ love the church? Christ died for the church. So a man is called to love his wife with a sacrificial love, to be willing to put his life for his wife. But see, most women, they don't know that part because I focus on submission. But it was not a suggestion even for a man to love his wife like that. It was a command. So before you can point fingers, ngimrespecta kanjani engene phuma, ngimthanda kanjani akwazi nokupheka, ngimthanda kanjani imbheke ukuthi uhlangahlangene kanjani. Look unto yourself. Have you submitted? Have you submitted unconditionally? And for the man, and for a man, have you loved unconditionally? Because a man is called to love his wife unconditionally. Not because it's easy to love your spouse. There are times your woman is not lovable. We don't talk about that. There are times ladies are not lovable in their behavior. Exactly. It's not my answer. There are times it's not easy to love your wife, but God has placed the command to love your wife unconditionally. And he has placed a command for us ladies to respect our husbands unconditionally. Siyawathanda ama-conditions. Ngizomrespect makabuye ngo-7, nangabuye nango-6.
But friends, I think marriages are different. So you and I sit down and we get married and we have our rules. Rules is a strict word, but you know what I mean? Like sort of our belief system within our marriage.
Yes.
That, okay, have your life, I have my life. Have your friends, I have my friend. But there are boundaries required within
There are
that marriage.
definitely boundaries.
If I say to you,
There are
Mina, I do not want a home where Ubaba Walaikaya leaves on a Friday night and comes back on Sunday morning.
Then he does.
And you consistently do that.
Exactly. Then he does. Then what are you going to say? You're going to say, I'm not going to submit. Submitting to your husband is submitting to God. Loving your wife is submitting to God.
But how do you
so ultimately, you are not disobeying indoda yakho, because indoda zangithi you must submit. He didn't make that command. That's another thing we need to know. So God wants us to look at ourselves first. You know, God, if you truly have a relationship with God, go to God uyothanda uthi yazi uNkulunkulu lo baba la endlini khona manje wenzena kanje nakanje mina futhi angikhona. The first thing is going to ask you ukuthi wena umhloniphile unconditionally. God doesn't like you pointing fingers at other people. He likes him pointing into your heart. I'm not saying it's right for a person to jump boundaries, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen because no person is perfect. And I'm not saying it's okay to treat
what you want in your marriage.
spouse in an ill manner. No, that is not right, even in the eyes of God. But firstly, look into yourself. Have you kept the command God has placed for you in the marriage?
What if I have? What if I'm all of those things? I am loving, I am warm, ngikhulisa abantwana, there's food on the table, the house is clean, your clothes are ironed. I'm ticking all the boxes that biblically says my role is as a wife. But
Does your
who just completely disregards you.
Does your husband feel the same way? Because you can think you are respecting your husband.
But why does he not communicate that?
But your husband might have a different story.
But he must communicate that. What are you fixing by going around and sleeping with the whole village and then bringing kids into the marriage?
No, that is not right.
What are you? Because
that is wrong.
This is my issue. It's this thing of people want to hide behind, I'm a man will, a man can. A man.
No, a
You
man,
have a responsibility
exactly.
now.
And if someone is a true man, and if someone is confident in his manhood, he will treat his wife with love. Because manhood, that's where it's based, in treating your wife with love, because you are one now. God said a man must love his wife like he loves his own body. Saying if you don't love your wife, it means you don't love your own body. It means a man or cheater it's an issue with him. It's not even an issue with the wife. It's an issue with him. A man who's settled in his manhood, who's confident in who he is in Christ, won't be pointing to you, phela mina ngiyindoda, hayibo.
We know.
Because you're secured. But if I go secured, also a point, you must submit. If he truly is settled in who he is in God, he doesn't have to be pointing. Because now umuntu, you've got flaws. As a leader, actually, he must be willing to give you grace. Because he must lead in the grace that God has given us as his people.
So you don't agree that submission is inspired?
Submission can be inspired, but first and foremost, it's a command.
It's a
I don't want you
command.
to wait.
Should do it anyway.
I don't want for you to wait for your husband to do something for you so that you can submit. Because one thing again, as ladies, we can be very manipulative. We know the art of manipulating. Us ladies, Haibo, my friend, us. No, we know our husband's weaknesses. We know their preferences in the bedroom, outside, and everything. We can use all those things. Umuntu mama can be manipulative. So you don't want to do something because you want to spark something back at you. You should do it because you fear God first and foremost. Because God has placed the command for you to do. Because ultimately you submit to God before you can even submit to me and Wako. That's the thing. If you see it that way, then you won't be feeling like this man is bossing me around, because he's not the one who made this command. And yet again, man is not assisted in a bastande unconditionally. So, it's God who has placed that. God is serious about the order of things, and God is serious about placing a man as the leader, to the point that God said, if this husband now does not know how to treat this gorgeous wife of his in a good way, even his prayers won't be answered. I don't know if most men know that. some of the challenges we are facing in our marriage, we should check how we're treating each other. God is not angry at us, but Tina, we have woken out of acting according to the covenant. Because if we don't act according to the covenant, we forfeit the blessings, we forfeit the covering, we forfeit the promises that comes with this covenant. So we are facing so many challenges. And SBC because you don't know how to treat your wife as a special and a weaker vessel, like God says.
You expose her to all kinds of...
Exactly. God said you should treat her with understanding because women are sensitive. Women can be emotional. So we need to look into ourselves first, both us as ladies and the men as well. It's not like, yeah, nabo mama yenzani logo, or tina sithi, yeah, nabo baba. No. We need to assess ourselves.
I hear you on the, we don't fear God in a lot of our decision making, but I think also because we are human, our egos in the heat of the moment, your ego is like,
that's true.
The
ego.
I don't need to tolerate this.
And I'm glad you brought the ego. Hey, I'm so glad you brought the ego, because God didn't command a woman to love his husband. Wonder why? God said you must respect and submit to your husband, because a man's greatest need is in his head, which is his ego. That's why you ought to respect and submit, because a man can do anything for the one who respects him, for the one who submits to him. And God said to this man, you must love your wife, love like Christ loved the church. Why? Because our greatest need as ladies is in our heart, security, being secured in the love of our husband. Ukuthi I am settled, I am rooted. Loba uyangithanda. You see, men have an ego. Uthanda, ungathandi, ungangena uphume. Men have an ego. And we have an ego as well as ladies. But let me tell you, men have a bigger ego than
much
you.
Bigger ego.
And if you're gonna approach a man from an ego point of view, because he's got a bigger ego than you. You can never have a bigger ego than a man. You can never. That's why God wants you to feed it by saying respect and submit. A man can live without you loving him. But as long as you respect and submit, feed his ego. And one thing about men, they understand rank. They understand ranking. Have you seen men at work? They understand there's a manager, there's a supervisor. They don't have a problem with the rank. Abu Bab. Tinabo mama, we struggle with the rank. We're thinking we are being oppressed. Why me? That's us. We struggle with ranking. Even men, how they engage with other men. They engage from a point of rank. If they know good to this certain guy, has a certain place of position, they approach them with that sense of respect, because ego. How do we engage with each other as ladies? From a point of love. Siyathandana esabo mama. My friend, I love you. You know what I mean? Like, because security is important to us. Yes. So the challenges that now happens for us ladies, when we're having our fights, you know how you fight is very important.
Yeah,
you
it's
face
everything.
A man from a point of an ego, like a bull in a crown. A man is gonna tackle you exactly in that way.
So how are we supposed to fight then?
Fight with respect.
How?
Fight with love. How you tell me?
In the heat of the moment, if I lose my cool.
That's the thing. The heat of the moment, humble cooler. Go cool down. That's the thing. We have this anxiety of approaching things now. Yeah. Even the issues we have in our marriage, we want God to fix them now. God is in the process of things. Things are a process. God can do a miracle now if he wants to, but sometimes God takes us through a journey because he knows in that journey we're bound to learn something. Cool off. You don't have to approach in the heat of the moment, because chances are you're going to say something you don't mean. You're going to be disrespectful. And this goes for both parties.
Yes,
male
men and women.
Yes. You're going to say something you don't mean. You're gonna disrespect your spouse. You're just going to be inappropriate. Take your time to calm down. And when you come back and sit and communicate
So that's the respectful way to approach
with
it.
love.
Okay.
With love, because now in the heat of the moment,
And the same with him, because men can be very harsh.
I'm saying the same with
Yeah.
men can be
Men
very
can be
harsh.
very,
Men
very
can be very
harsh.
harsh. Men can but shouting at their wives as if their wives are their kids. And one thing that I had to understand in marriage is that my spouse is not my kid. But he had to understand the same thing as well, that I am not his kid as well.
Not a child, yeah.
We are not kids. Even your approach in things, you must remember,
Yes.
they're an adult, so I should communicate as such.
Another thing I often think is a cause of some of the issues is that when women get married, there's so much advice directed towards the females.
The woman, yeah.
I have never seen a man being sat down and told, "Magashata ukuthi phela,
Ganje and stuff.
you don't hit your woman. Mhloniphe, mthande, make sure, you have to change. Like there's almost a free reign that is given to them when they get married.
to a man,
It's like,
yeah.
oh, you're respectable, so khulile manje, well done, congratulations. But there's no one sitting you down and saying, "Bheka manje,
Yeah.
you're going to have to cut some of your friends.
Yes.
You're going to have to be uzphathe in a certain
like a
way.
leader now.
Act like a leader.
Yes.
Carry yourself a certain way. Your income, you're going to have to provide for your family. As much as, yes, it's a two-income household, a lot
but
of these.
he's the provider.
But you must step into this. Like,
Exactly.
I don't hear a lot of men talking about how they were sat down and guided. It's almost as though, congratulations, so
You're the
khulile
man.
manje, you're a man,
Bangene.
yeah, again, like there's almost this bravado, and
Exactly.
there isn't the same type of sitting down that happens to women.
Yes, like they will sit
"Usiphathe
a
kahle."
woman
Yes, they
and
sit you
everything,
down and they
and they tell
"Usiphathe
you,
kahle,
yes.
ungaslazi ngale."
Bablaye konke lokho.
Why does that not happen with guys? Why can
I think it differs with culture though, because I'm Zulu.
yes,
And I'm married to a Tswana family. And they actually do that with their males. They take them to the kraal, and all the males of the family and the village, they sit with him, and they tell him all these things. You are the head now, like they do with the lady. And I know in some other cultures that is not done. But I think
it's also a city versus village thing.
yes,
In the city, there's-
exactly, yeah. But still, then they still want to do
Yes.
it with the ladies.
Yes, with the ladies, yeah.
I think that's the thing that we need to look into. We focus, we prepare and
women.
train women so much
Yes.
for being an adult,
Absolutely.
for running a household,
Yes.
for being a mom,
Yes.
for being a wife.
You even hear aunts
yeah.
bathi uzoba umfazi onjani
Njani.
ulele ngalesi
Yes,
khathi."
but yet
But
my brother
ngale,
is yabona.
he's allowed to do
Exactly,
whatever.
yes. And then while our male counterparts, they don't get all this.
Because
And
it's a training from a very young
A
age
very young
that
age.
if you want to be
Exactly.
someone who maintains a household and has your kids growing under your household,
certainly.
certain behaviors have to be upheld.
They have to, and I think that part. It's a fatherly
Oh,
job.
that's a big
to
thing.
talk to his
And
son.
another thing is our society now.
Our society,
Fathers are absent.
but one thing about our society as well, there's a lack of balance, and we need to be very careful with the society because it's prompting the woman.
Yeah.
I ain't got support
Yeah,
Baba Mama, prompting the
true.
woman. You
It's
can
true.
you empowering you and everything while they don't empower
We're not empowering our
men.
boys. We are
and
not.
and we should be very careful. What is the agenda? Because the agenda here, we are being like sort of like forcefully spoon fed that we can do what a man can do. Da 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 da. Who said we want to be like men? Like honestly.
I think we want some of the industries, want to be in engineering, want to be in mining, but I don't want to be a man. I don't want to take on.
But that's the thing. It's sort of like they want us now to compete with our made up
Yes.
counterparts. That if he can do this because he's a man, I can. No. We need to be honest with ourselves. A woman and a man are equals, but they're different.
Yes.
That's why God, when He created Eve, He took the side of the man, which is the rib. He didn't take his back. He didn't take now by the feet. He took the side to show that, you know what, you are equals. But in marriage, there's a rank. You are equals, but we are not the same. We are not created the same. And there's a purpose and there's a reason behind that because a role of a man, emshadweni, is to lead, is to be the head, is to be the priest of the home, is to be the provider, is to be the protector, is to be the shepherd, is to love and care for umama nomndeni wakhe like Christ. Those are the roles of Christ in the church. That's why God was comparing it to Christ. Then what is our role? God said we are the helper of the man. Because God has placed a vision in every marriage that this man now, who is the leader, needs to work it out. When, as his helper, you need to help him work out this vision. Now, I don't think you can be called to help someone if ngempela uyislima. If you don't have something to put on the table, if you don't have something to bring on the table. It's how God values us as women. He said this man is not good when he's alone. He needs a suitable helper. Because this helper now is one of his own, and this helper is an equal to him, and this helper will help him fulfill the purpose and the assignment that God has placed within this marriage and within his heart. So men need us.
But there's been conversations in the last couple of years about how men have become very soft and very not as masculine
No, I get you.
as what we grew up used to.
But what do you think the reason to that is?
Because women have become very masculine.
Women have emasculated men. That's the agenda of the society. That's what I was telling you. Competing with your men. What you can do, I can do. That's what they're spoon feeding us.
So what? He takes a back seat because
there's always going to be a balance. There's always going to be a balance in a relationship. If you're going to run with the masculine energy, the other one has no point to lean to their feminine. And a woman who runs in her masculine energy all the time. We need our masculine energy at work, pursuing our dreams and everything. Yes. But in the unity of marriage, in the sacredness of marriage,
be an egg.
She's a 10 off.
Yeah.
She's a 10 off. You'll wonder your husband because you are competing with him to the point that he has no place in this unity. Because phela wena usuyi-leader. Usuya-leader wena usugijimela phambili, uwe nje uqhuba phambili. Today's woman, the issue with us ladies today, nami ngilapho. In that package, we have emasculated men so much that men can hardly find a place for him because we want to take the role of a man in marriage. We want to take a role of a man in marriage.
And you think,
just like Eve did at the garden. Eve started being a leader now. She's under the submission of her husband. What did Adam do? He leaned in the passive role because when you've taken the leadership, he was not supposed to do that actually. You are supposed to stand up to the wife, you're out of line. But that's the thing. We as women lately in this society, we are taught to be so forceful, to be so pushy that most ladies know nothing about being feminine. They think being feminine is having beautiful hair, makeup, wearing dress. No, being feminine is something deeper within in your soul. How God created you to be a softer landing, to be a weaker vessel that you may nurture.
And funny enough, as much as these roles are changing, a feminine man is a turn-off for a woman, and a masculine woman is a turn-off for a man.
It's because in the core of our hearts,
it's not,
we know how things ought to be.
Yeah.
We know how things...
It's like, how are you comfortable?
A man who's masculine, are you sexy?
Yes, very.
Oh, sexy,
very attractive. Very.
So, leaning a feminine mzini wakho bantu, aqhuba be-sexy. No, honestly.
So, what must you do?
It's a good question because I'll be honest with you. I'm the first one at home, and there was a season in my life where I ran so much in the masculine
energy.
So much to the point that I didn't even know what.
And you've got brothers.
Yes, I didn't even know what resting is because femininity dwells in you just being, in you just resting. Just trusting
be an egg.
He'll just carry it.
Just be this fragile egg.
You know what I mean? So sometimes we as women, it's our strength, but it can be our weakness. Yes. Because one thing about a strength, it can be a weakness. we are fixers. We like fixing. We like organizing things. We like putting things together because we are called to run a household, right? So if now your spouse is sort of passive in a certain area, he's not really leading, because women are very uncomfortable with uncertainty. They don't want to just leave it there.
Yeah. We like stability.
Yeah, has exactly security.
Security
Like
and
God knows
stability,
us.
yes.
But you see now, that's when we are tested. It's a command. Submit to him. When you submit to a man, you must create space for your man to lead. A man cannot lead when there's no space for him to lead.
So I guess
So iyeke into mayikizinze lapho ukuyibona ukuthi and I know it's going to kill you because one thing about us, when you ask your husband to do something, you want him right away to stand up and do it. And sometimes it's hours, sometimes it's days, sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's months. But you see those things that you see, that's when you go, hey, uNkulunkulu nale leadership ongibeke kuyo. Hayi umlido la. Nagu ngapha nanga. Do you know what I mean? Because what you think is a trend match is not what your husband thinks.
and I guess it's also how you deliver the message to him.
Certainly.
If you are, hey, why is this still not
Uzohlala
done?
phansi.
Uzohlala
Phansi,
phansi. Whereas
to prove
if
to
you say,
you ukuthi I don't answer to you.
yes, whereas if you sit him down and you say, hey, Yazi, that door is really bothering me. Can you please, when you get
Yes,
time, just
exactly.
fix it? Your tone is different. Your delivery is different.
Yes.
It's a plea to him. Then it seems like
Let me be a superhero.
Yes, let me be a superhero.
Let me just, if we as ladies can realize the power that we have, that God has given us to work with our husband, we will use that. But our power is not outside of our womanhood. Too often we try to get outside our womanhood, that we even not think our womanhood and how God has created a woman, it's actually a good thing because we've learned so much to compete with a man. Our power, our femininity. Bantu awuke nje ube ngathi nawe your hands azisebenzi ukuthi kunini ngifuna ukupheka, but the light I can't even prepare a meal. So ngiyekile bantu ngithe masongilungisele le light ngizo attenda, you know. And that's the thing, when you ask your spouse to do something for you, don't dictate him. How he does it, it's not for you. It's not for you. And that goes for men as well. It's not for you. If you ask him to fix a light and he calls an electrician and you think, but my brother can fix a bulb, it's not up to you. Oksalayo, he's doing leadership the best way he can with his gifts and everything. So the thing about us ladies, we can nag and we can dictate. Ufuna yenze lo, ufuna yenze kanje. Mina baba mphela, he was good, he was handy. No, asuka baba kola. La, awukho kashabalala. By the way, that's another thing. Allow space for your husband to lead. Allow space for your husband to grow in his leadership. Remember, your husband was not a leader. He was under his father's authority. So now, only now, he's figuring out this leadership role.
And sometimes he wasn't even under his father.
Yeah,
so he's figuring it out. That
exactly.
He's got no example.
No example of a father. You know what I mean? And it's a daunting task. Give him grace. Sometimes let him just sit on its own with this task before him to figure, and he's going to make mistakes. He's going to do pathetic mistakes according to you, Pela. Pela mama's called us no, I mean I can do it better. I thought he was no, it's not about you. Sit down, usubmit and run the household and feel your position. Because the moment you jump into another person's position, who's feeling your position? Who's feeling your position? And the same thing with men. They must allow their wives to now navigate the space of being a nurturer. You know,
some men also overstep.
Yeah.
Now he's telling her about the curtains. And
no.
Like, can I also just
yes,
be in my space?
Can I just explore and see what works for me? Yes, I'll consider your suggestions
definitely,
and your preferences,
definitely.
But give me allowance. We need to give each other space to navigate this foreign space, to navigate these new roles. You know, with the help of the Holy Spirit, of course. But manje wena mawufuna ukuzenza iHoly Spirit empilweni yomyeni wakho kanjani? Yenza kanje uNkulunkulu yena yenzeni? You know what I mean? So we need to have grace towards one another. Grace is a big one because
Yeah, grace is a big one.
we
We are
need
gonna
to-
mess up.
sometimes
so
I'm gonna
many
cook and I'm gonna
times.
ban the food.
Yes.
It looks like Sheila mos. Idla nge-humility. Because you don't know where I'm giving you grace, especially guys because they have an
Yes.
ego.
Yes,
and
yes,
we're not gonna
yes,
mention
yes,
it
yes,
because
yes.
we know see a in the grace sometimes.
Too much.
You know what I mean? I mean, with the act of boosting our husband's ego, masfuna. But that's the thing, we need to do it even noma kungekho lula when it's not easy because it's a command. And ultimately we are submitting to God. If you want God to be the head and the leader ultimately of your home, follow his way of doing things. Follow his structure. It's not going to be easy. You're going to fumble. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to step on your
irritated.
spouse's feet and everything. But God wants the willingness.
I think one of the biggest things for me is grace. I think grace is everything.
And you're good at giving grace.
People are not perfect.
Even as a friend.
They are gonna mess up time and
time
sometimes you've got
again.
such deeply ingrained habits that when you tell a person to stop doing something, it's not gonna happen overnight.
So now you want me to change something that I've been doing for the past
30-something
30 years in a split second. That's
it
another
takes
thing.
years of reflection and realizing. And we are more umuntu when they are trying.
They're willing, but
to
they're
do
struggling.
better, but they are struggling. Yeah. So grace is a big one.
And that can be rooted in having control issues as a partner. You don't want to give a person an allowance and grace to work the space out. Yes, it's something that really bothers you and you have addressed it. But like msigele in prayer, God help him. God help her. Because husbands, they ought to be praying for their wives as well. Actually, husbands need to be the priest of the household. They need to lead. Sizolandela. So if your husband akalidi, silandelani. That's another thing. Both of us must assess ourselves. Ukuthi mina ngempela, am I doing what God has called me to do in this partnership, in this union, in this marriage? Ungabi passive, ube pointer your spouse. We all have
You've
a role
contributed.
to play. Yes.
So before we close, like I said earlier, you've been married for a decade now. What are the secrets to a healthy, happy marriage? Emphasis on healthy, because just because you got to 20 years, but 20 years,
Doesn't mean it
you
was
look like a
healthy.
different person. You're not even the same person. What are the secrets, in your opinion, based on your own experience and wisdom, of a healthy, happy marriage? What do we do to get to that point? What are the secrets? Give me like 5 or 10 if you can.
Honestly, I think until we put God at the throne of our hearts, then we'll be able to do things accordingly. Too often, at the throne of our heart is marriage. The idea of being married. I'm idolizing umshado, that even God himself has no place in my heart. I think we need to check within our hearts, first and foremost. Who is sitting there? Is it me? Am I idolizing myself? Am I idolizing my husband or my wife? We are not called to idolize each other. We are called to serve each other. But first and foremost, let's put back God at the throne of our heart. Let's put God back at the center of our marriage. First and foremost, because marriage is from God. We didn't create marriage. Society didn't create marriage. AmaZulu, AmaXhosa, God created marriage. So let's put him back first. And let's have a heart of servanthood. Let's have a heart of servanthood.
That's an important
Be
one.
willing to serve. Yazi ukuseva hey kubuhlungu. Uzoseva vele ubhekile futhi. Guys, yena uzoyenza.
Yes.
No, that is not serving. That's a transaction because you're doing something because you want something back. That's not serving. We lie and say we're serving, but we're not. When you serve ultimately, my friend, ultimately, kubuhlungu kunjani, because it's not easy to serve. You're trusting that the Almighty God will reward you if your spouse doesn't. Uphekile, wayenzani, walungisa ekamereni, waba ready. Ay, angena abe busy, angakuboni ukuthi ugqokeni, angene, hey, kusasa ngino meeting, i-laptop alale. You feel rejected, especially us as ladies. But you trust that God sees all those efforts and you're looking unto him to reward you. Because umuntu wenyama is not going to be perfect. Umuntu wenyama is going to disappoint you. Umuntu wenyama is going to have flaws. But when you're looking kunkulunkulu as the head of this marriage, he is going to reward me because I'm submitting to his word. I'm submitting to his ways. Because his submission goes hand in hand in a trust.
Yes.
It's very hard to submit to someone you don't trust because you're not sure what does he have my best interest at heart,
You have
and
one
all
foot
those
out.
things. So let's have a heart of being a servant. Let's give grace upon grace upon grace, and let's love unconditionally. Let's love unconditionally. There's something I wanted to read for you so that it can be a reflection and a mirror for us to check our own hearts.
Okay.
Because it's nama standard phela awethu esiwafunayo, but let's check ourselves according to what God has placed for us. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 4 to 8, it says, love is patient. Am I patient with my spouse? Love is kind. Am I kind with my spouse? It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. How many times we have done something because of pride in our marriage?
Yeah.
Many people are out of their marriage today because of pride. It does not dishonor others. How many times we dishonor the ones we claim we love the most? It is not self-seeking. We are a self-seeking generation. That's all we do. Mina mangaba writing, they're sorted, I'm done. It is not easily angered. Drama. We don't even know how to regulate our own emotions. And I'm talking to myself here. People with a huge character. Yes. We need to learn how to regulate our emotions. Yes. We need to learn to act out of love even when we are angry. Yes. It keeps no record of wrongs. Hayi abo mama sine Bible. Tshela nama dates ukuthi yasineli boku 18 September ngiyacela boku 2:00. Love does not delight in evil but rejoices with the truth. What is the truth? The truth is the ways of God. Because God is unchanging. He is stable. The truth does not fluctuate because when namhlanje ufila ngathi uzosubmit, you stick with the truth. It always protects. Let's protect our spouses. Let people know they can't come to you about your spouse gabi uba entertain. You just listen and you know ukuthi baba ngiyaxolisa ngizozama ukukhuluma naye ngizwe his side of the story. It protects. Always trust. Love, trust. You trust ukuthi, man, there's good in him. God is going to help him. He's doing this because there's this wound. But I trust uNkulunkulu to heal this wound. It always trusts. It always hopes. Hopes for better days. Yes. Hopes for healing. Hope for romance. It always perseveres. Asifuna persevere. Love never fails. Everything will fail. Everything will come and go. But true love that is based on God never fails. It's always there. Unless ukhuluma infatuation, ikhona namhlanje, kusasa yikho. But love, which is rooted in God, it never fails. Umuntu umthanda senhlukene. Sidivosile uthi ngisamthanda babe ingane zami, because true love never fails. And true love rooted in God, it perseveres. And that kind of love, this kind of love, it gets produced after sindlule eyintweni emshadweni. So we expect to reach this love in 2 months. You need to grow with the person. You need to see their weaknesses. You need to see their core. Then you learn how to love them unconditionally.
Wow. That's a great way to wrap. Thank you so much, Matshepo. That was just an amazing lesson in being selfless in the way we love each other within our relationships and our marriages. And I think, I hope that people can take away what they can from those things and self-reflect. I think a big part of relationships and growing as a person is reflecting on your contributions to some of the tensions and the issues that we face. So thank you for coming. and
pleasure.
your wisdom is always so refreshing.
I thank God, my friend. Thank you so much.
Guys, thank you for joining us on this segment of The Honest Hour, talking about love, marriage, and relationships. See you next time. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Let us know what you think by leaving a review. Also, remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time for some more honest conversations.